If you've been sitting at your desk, staring at your screen, trying to feel creative, only to be scrolling on TikTok and Pinterest for the 15th time today, you might be experiencing a creative block. Recognizing these signs early can help you avoid a creative rut or lacking inspiration. Welcome back to Christ Centered Creativity, the space where faith and creativity meet. I'm your host, Jada Simone, and here we edify you, encourage you, and inspire you to create within God's will and to execute the ideas He has blessed you with. Have you ever hit a point where your ideas just aren't flowing like they usually do? Or where the thought of creating feels more like a burden than something that brings you joy? Trust me, I've been there. And today, we're talking about creative blocks, and more importantly, how to overcome creative blocks with God. If you've been sitting at your desk, staring at your screen, trying to feel creative, only to be scrolling on TikTok and Pinterest for the 15th time today, you might be experiencing a creative block. But the good news is, we can overcome creative blocks with God. Creative blocks are often a sign that something deeper is going on, whether it's spiritual warfare, a need to rest, or just needing to spend more time with God. So let's break it down and understand how we can overcome these creative blocks with God at the forefront. So here's some signs you're experiencing a creative block. Number 1, your passion and desire to create seems to no longer be there. Number 2, you dread creating, and creating feels more like a chore instead of a calling from God. Number 3, you're experiencing brain fog and the ideas seem to not be flowing like they used to. Number 4, you find yourself scrolling endlessly through apps like Pinterest and TikTok, trying to find inspiration from other creatives much more than you usually would. And number 5, paired with number 4, your inspiration for what you're creating is solely coming from other people, meaning you're looking at other people's creations and art and you're using that as your source for creativity. And there's nothing wrong with finding inspiration from others as creatives, but when that becomes your source of your creativity and why you're creating, it can become a problem. Recognizing these signs early can help you avoid a creative rut or lacking inspiration. So now that we've talked about some signs that you're experiencing a creative block, let's talk about why these creative blocks may be happening. Understanding the reason behind the creative block is the first step to overcoming it. So one of the reasons you could be experiencing a creative block is spiritual warfare. The enemy loves when he can distract us from what God is calling us to do, whether it's through distractions like comparing what we're creating to others or just through endlessly scrolling on social media. He also loves to play with our minds. So you may think you're just experiencing brain fog when in reality it's spiritual warfare and the enemy trying to get you off your course. The second reason you may be experiencing a creative block is that God is transitioning you to something new. For example, God may be transitioning you to a new career path, and with that, He may be wanting you to enter a season of rest to prepare for that new season. The third reason that you could be experiencing a creative block is burnout. We cannot pour from an empty cup, and creative work takes time and a lot of energy. And number 4, one of the main reasons you could be experiencing a creative block is a lack of relationship with God. We know as believers that God is our source for everything, including creativity. He is the creator. So if our relationship is off with Him as the creator, then of course our creativity will not be flowing like it usually does. Have you ever felt like you're trying to pour everything in creating, but nothing seems to work? And you also know that your relationship with God has been off. That is the reason why. So now that we've talked about why these creative blocks may be happening, let's talk about how we can overcome creative blocks with God. I do want to say there's no one size fits all when it comes to creative block, but it's important that we all seek God on why these creative blocks are happening. Prayer and seeking God's wisdom is powerful, and you will never go wrong with seeking out God. So the first point I want to touch on when it comes to overcoming creative block is to strengthen your relationship with God. Like we already discussed in point 2 when we talked about why these creative blocks may be happening, creative blocks often happen when we've drifted away from our relationship with God. Matthew 6 verse 33 says, "But seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Now, this particular verse is talking about our needs and actual needs like clothes, water, food. But this can also apply to seeking first the kingdom of God, seeking our relationship with God before we seek anything else. And that also includes creating. When our relationship with God has fallen off, but we're still wanting to produce things and create things and post on social media, post content and do this and that, we've lost focus of the reason why we're creating in the first place. Our reason for creating is not for our own ambitions. It's to advance the kingdom of God. If your relationship is off, so will your creativity be off. Because like we said earlier in the episode, God is the creator. And we're creating to advance his kingdom, not for selfish ambition. So a practical tip for strengthening your relationship with God may look like praying before you pick up your phone to check your email or post content on TikTok or Instagram. It may look like starting your day with God before doing anything else, before touching a paintbrush, before recording a song. Before you write, plan, or paint anything, seek God and invite him into your day. Invite him into your creative space in what you're creating. A second tip on overcoming a creative block with God is to rest physically and spiritually. Matthew 11 verse 28 through 30 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Rest in God is powerful, and you may be experiencing a creative block because you're not resting in God. As creatives who are called to create for God's glory, when we're not resting in God, it can turn into burnout. Resting in God may look like you taking one day off a week from working and truly making time to spend time with God and to rest in him. God cares more about us than he does about what we're creating. If we're burnt out, tired, and creating what God has called us to is starting to feel like a burden, that is a sign we need to rest in him. He desires for us to take breaks. I know society and hustle culture says different. Don't stop, no sleep, this and that. But we shouldn't take that mentality on as believers because that is a trap from the enemy. We're not meant to work ourselves to where we're burnt out. We're meant to rest in God. And the third and final tip for overcoming creative blocks with God is prayer and fasting. Spend time with God, praying to him, asking him for clarity on why these creative blocks are happening. And also make time for cutting out the noise and distractions so you can hear his answer when he does answer you. A lot of times we'll pray to God and we'll ask him for wisdom and clarity, but we don't make the space to hear that wisdom and clarity. With prayer and doing a biblical fast from food to seek clarity and wisdom from God, this also may be paired with cutting out social media and anything else that has been distracting you from hearing God. Social media is a blessing, and it's a space where God has called many of us to post what he's calling us to create, but it can be a distraction. It's important to take breaks from social media as creatives to make sure we're not confusing what we're hearing from the outside noise as wisdom and clarity from God. Because yes, God can use others to confirm things, but the enemy can also use others to confuse what God is truly trying to tell us to do. So just to conclude what we talked about today, if you are experiencing a creative block, seek God, seek first his kingdom, and know that through doing that, he will bless you with wisdom and understanding why it's happening in the first place. And have faith and know that this creative block will not last forever. Thank you all so much for tuning in today's episode of Christ-Centered Creativity. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And comment down below which tip you're taking from this episode to overcome a creative block with God. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, be sure to give your girl a 5-star review. I hope you all have an amazing rest of the week. Stay blessed, stay creative, and I will see y'all next week. Bye.